Hello, my name is Jay Cunningham, and I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Washington in the Department of Human-Centered Design and Engineering. And I'm proud to present our work, The Cost of Culture and Analysis of Cash App and the Financial Inclusion of Black American Communities. This work was conducted beside collaborators Sydney Nguyen and my academic advisors, Julie Kint and Daniela Rosner. In this work, we examine the possibilities of mobile fintech and mobile banking applications and its role in serving Black communities amid legacies of structural racial inequalities. Through this, we offer grounded truth considerations for the continued design of financial technology that could have equitable impacts amongst historically marginalized communities. In our work, we emphasize the need for designers and design researchers to not only advocate for financial well-being amongst economically disadvantaged communities, but to also design thoughtfully in liberating ways that serve as interventions, services, and experiences. And so as digital money has become more of a standard of payment for us broadly throughout the American society, design scholars and designers must recognize the implications of historical and continued discriminatory financial practices. And so we scope our focus on African American communities to address increased financial inclusion amongst a racial ethnic community in the US that has been historically marginalized and excluded from financial autonomy. We center our focus and application on Cash App, which is a mobile payment service developed by Block Inc. that serves users in the US and UK, which allows users to do a couple of different things like send money, spend money, bank, and invest in stocks and cryptocurrencies. And preliminary research into the correlation between African Americans and Cash App suggested that there are certain cultural attunement, relativity, and influential factors that play a significant role in the adoption of the mobile application amongst African Americans, being that it's been widely ingrained in hip hop and urban culture in the US, and hip hop lexicon, and it's also been heavily used by Black unbanked communities in the US South. So we scope our research questions for the following, looking toward the experiences of Black Americans in financial technology through our analysis of Cash App, wanting to understand motivations and knowledges that drive their engagement, what design decisions can support economic development of Black Americans through their use of fintech, and what role might these participants see mobile fintech playing in supporting increased economic agency for their communities. And so for this work, we recruited participants who identified as African Americans. And this could have been defined in a number of different ways in which users were able to self-identify. And so context around this even further, we decided to address this because we were interested in understanding, even though there's been a shifting role of digital services, research on Black financial inclusion and information has only begun to consider the impacts of fintech on said communities. And along with this, we consider a number of different things from historical financial inclusion of Black Americans, and also legacies of engineered financial inequality. For this study, our goal was to use a mixed methods approach to investigate African Americans' perceptions of their relationships, engagements, and experiences in the context of their use of mobile financial technology. And so this was in three-part from a survey that was used to recruit and screen participants, in which we received 350 qualifying responses. A diary study, which was conducted over 30 days. 24 participants were invited, with 21 enrolling successfully through the study and matriculating throughout, having to submit at least 4 diary entries per week, and then participants were paid and compensated for their participation per week for their engagement with daily reminders. Lastly, we conducted 45 to 60-minute semi-structured interviews with 15 of those participants virtually via Zoom, where we addressed questions around the nuances of their experiences through storytelling, experience sharing, and kind of backtracking over what those financial activities had been over the past 30 days in the diary study to better understand how might these communities use the technology to support their everyday lives? And what might this tell us about how we could further expand the scope of financial technology, not only to be useful, but also useful in the context of economic development and financial wellness? So we had a number of participants from a broad range in which we use to capture really great nuances of our community in our sample size, with them living in a number of different areas, neighborhoods, ages, income levels, job classes, and so on. In our findings, we wanted to cover a number of things, from motivations and knowledges. We realized we learned that the application was used mostly as a supplementary financial tool for leisure, discretionary, or unplanned activities, with a subset of those participants actually depending on the application as their only banking source. So them essentially being unbanked in traditional ways of banking. We learned that Cash App allows for more flexibility and control over finances than traditional banking institutions. And along with this, we learned that social media played a really huge factor into the adoption of the platform, being that the platform is heavily marketed via Instagram and Twitter. And then participants attributed things like cultural attunement and culturally relevant marketing to their use of the application as well. In addition, participants really value things like time flexibility and flexible banking locations. Being able to wait for their money was something that was really a burden and can be detrimental for vulnerable communities. So some communities literally cannot afford to wait. And this is something that remains true for those who are historically marginalized in finances and who are economically maybe underdeveloped. Along with this, not having access to physical banking locations in some of their communities provided a really great avenue for mobile banking solutions to take place. When it came to addressing how might design decisions of fintech support economic development, we think of design decisions as practices and characteristics operationalized in fintech development. So this could be things like features, navigations, layouts, and so aspects that were really, really attractive to participants were things that were simple but safe. The application features that were explainable to them, that allowed them to have a better way to control their money through privacy and being able to access their finances when they needed them, providing moments of delight and amusement through the UI and design, quirky notification sounds, being able to use the application to support their communities locally, and being able to provide things like mutual aid and giving and so on. Additionally, aspects included tracking and visualizing financial activities, being able to see what those transactions were, constant reminders of how much money that they have. We saw participants talk about how they'd stored money under their beds because they didn't trust banks. And so being able to use Cash App allowed them to say, hey, here's how much money I have. Here's what I want to use it for. And also being able to promote financial literacy and investing knowledge. Cash App was a really great resource for them as it provides an investing guide and resources to understanding investing, where a number of our participants expressed that generationally their family had never invested before, and this was knowledge they did not have. And then lastly, the role of mobile fintech to support increased economic agency, really centered around a number of different things, from community-centered use, engaging Cash App to support Black-owned businesses, giving, and transactional communities. Cash App was used in a micro level to launch communities in Black communities, to launch businesses in Black communities and sustain them as well. Recognizing customer service where it traditionally could have been seen as an obstacle to banking and barrier to banking. A Cash App provides an email type of customer service, but there's also limitations and challenges for participants as well for not contacting someone physically. Another thing is being able to bridge the gap between financial knowledge and economic development. Fintech can, more frequently share knowledge with users to help guide them and lead them on the path to economic success and financial freedom. And then cultural attunement, where Black communities saw that the platform really had created somewhat of a culture in their communities. They created this sense of nuance around it, with some people even sharing that they recognize that more Black peers and family members use the application more than some of their colleagues, their non-Black friends, and in their communities as well. And so in our discussion, we have some open questions and opportunities. We end by considering opportunities for design scholarships to strengthen community education and contribute what we call empathy to financial services. And so going beyond the legacies of distrust for these communities, and being able to, observe the need for additional avenues for communal financial care through fintech if possible, and also operationalizing and taking advantage of community cultural assets. And so several participants emphasize the importance of elevating already thriving forms of community support. And then so what we want to do is echo this kind of concern for questioning what positive changes could asset-based fintech in this perspective bring to Black American communities who have continuously resisted and persisted through inequities in economic development. And so in our conclusion, we scope our focus on African American communities to amplify and galvanize the need for increased financial inclusion amongst the racial community that has been historically oppressed and excluded in the U.S. And our findings suggest that participants persist and navigate contemporary financial systems against the backdrop of social and cultural capacities. So I want to give a special thanks to my whole entire research team, my co-authors, and student research assistants who participated in this study to make it possible. Also, the community organizations that we were able to connect with in our local area to share this study out and disseminate it amongst amongst the community people that they serve. Thank you so much for attending this talk. We invite you to read the full article. Thank you.